Today's talk focuses on two primary areas. The first one is Daimler has delivered the first in a series, or Daimler Freightliner has delivered a first in a series of semi-trucks in the Los Angeles market. And the first truck that was introduced is $400,000. And if we look at what it would cost for the semi version of that, it exceeds $500,000 for a vehicle that Tesla is charging $250,000 for. So that's the first focus of our show today. The second thing that we're focused on today is where are we in the options as well as investment profile of Tesla. As we know, earnings just came out and Tesla has begun sales to Europe. So the question is, how should we modify our thesis relative to where Tesla currently is going forward? And then beyond that, we have our usual review of what's going on at our service facility and also our health tips. This is Greg for Tesla Fan Insight. Thanks once again for joining us. If this is your first time on our channel, please take time to like and subscribe. If you're a repeat visitor, welcome back. So, sort of some bombshell news hit, and that was the fact that the Freightliner division of Daimler-Benz has begun deliveries to the Port of Los Angeles with the help of Penske of their version of the electric semi-truck. So it was kind of shocking. There are a bunch of elements to what we learned. As of December 23rd, there were 2 trucks delivered. And in fact, there was supposed to be a fleet of 25 trucks, both Class 7, which is a 55,000 max carrying truck and freight, and Class 8, which is an 80,000 max carrying of freight and truck. And the bottom line is that it was announced that the only 2 trucks would be delivered at the Class 7 level. The Class 7 and the Class 8 was delayed. So I wanted to, at this point, give a special shout out to Bob Lutz, because if we've been tracking his comments and behavior relative to competing firms. And in the case of Bob Lutz, he was talking about 22 models coming out from GM. But in this case, in the truck space, Daimler has been the primary go-after Tesla entity with large dollars to do so thus far. And it was kind of a shock to have them announce in June of 2018 that they would deliver an electric fleet as a starting point, and then come back and announce that the fleet that they were supposed to deliver was not ready. So I'm kind of shocked, surprised, amazed, because Daimler, as we all know, is one of the biggest, the most powerful companies in the world, and missing deadlines, especially with Tesla about to start delivering Class 8 to early customers, is a bit of a shock surprise given how important the vehicle is and their 40% market share being threatened by the arrival of the Tesla Semi. So, as we've done in the past, I like to roll video of the Daimler trucks operating in Germany, and it's kind of interesting because Daimler's development of electric trucks is a global enterprise, where Freightliner is the U.S. version of that. And it's kind of a surprise to see that Daimler simply didn't just ship over the European version of the truck so that U.S. customers would immediately have that product to work with, and are instead developing a brand new truck out of the Freightliner division, and that's late. So I'm kind of shocked, stunned by this behavior, given that the competition in the form of Tesla is coming on very quickly. The next thing that pops up is the fact that, there was a statement made by the head of Daimler Trucks that part of the advantage they offered over Tesla was that they were offering their prototype vehicles without charge. And now we hear that there's actually a $40,000 or $400,000 charge for this vehicle. But I would say that what plays into this is that in the greater Los Angeles area, there's a focus on pollution reduction. And there's a question as to whether or not the pricing of the vehicle isn't a reflection of the fact that there's 40 to 100 million, there's millions, possibly $100 million worth of subsidized buying that's going on within Greater California, and specifically focused on what's going on with pollution coming from freight movement in the greater Los Angeles area. So it's quite possible that they've decided to make the price higher than it needs to be in order to take advantage of the fact that the money is available and it reduces their overall development costs. I think this, if that's the case, I think it's a poor choice given that the port uses thousands of trucks, and why gouge somebody who potentially represents one of your largest customers in the world? So I therefore think that it is possibly a $400,000 vehicle given the cost of fairly new products in the form of the battery packs they've developed. Now, I chose for this to be our headline and lead part of our show today because I fully expected Daimler to start showing up with products that were a year or two away from delivery that would be very competitive with what Tesla might be doing. And, you know, at a $400,000 price point against Tesla's well, it's not even a $400,000. Tesla is not showing a Class 7 truck. So we're extrapolating that right now. The Class 8 truck coming from Daimler-Benz rolls in at about $500,000 a piece versus $250K for Tesla. So the bottom line is that, you know, it doesn't look like there's any competition there. Other specs that we might consider between the two vehicles is the current Class 7 truck offered by Daimler is targeted at about 200 miles in range against Tesla's 600 mile in range that's targeted for the truck as it comes to market at the semi level. So it's quite clear that what Daimler has been talking about the fact that they were hugely behind, is being illustrated in terms of what we're seeing, you know, from these developments. I have to say that this is kind of a shock to see this going on. It's hard to understand if a company the size of Daimler has been developing products for 10 years, why the solution that we're seeing represents such a poor execution. The other note to make on this is that there's a company called Thor in Greater Los Angeles that actually is working with UPS and other large customers of Daimler with their electric truck solution, but they actually have a prototype that's running on the streets. So it's kind of a surprise that there hasn't been any efforts by Daimler to possibly buy this company and immediately be able to fold what they've delivered into their portfolio so they can start offering that to global customers. So I'm at a loss here because the only thing that I can figure out that might be an issue for Daimler is the fact that, you know, I brought up Bob Lutz, and the point Bob Lutz was making is when you have companies that have unlimited resources and they're global, they can meet obligations of delivery of everything they say they're going to do much easier than small firms like Tesla because they have all those resources. So to have a company the size of Daimler introduce the fact that they're late on a very important product that might affect their future dramatically as Tesla moves forward is a shock. This also is a wink-wink at the future prospects of how long it's going to take for the big auto firms around the world to respond effectively to the Tesla onslaught. I wanted to add a sidebar note here is for those of you who saw the Super Bowl ad, there was actually an Audi commercial where they were describing by 2025 they'll have a very large presence when it comes to electric vehicles. And the fact of the matter is that, you know, consumers can't drive 2025 cars right now, but obviously they're preserving mind share to not get too involved with Tesla and others because they'll have solutions available later. Again, a surprise because VW is such a huge company. One last note here with VW is the fact that, as we all know, it was just announced that the Tesla battery pack would be used by VW to build out its U.S. charging network. Obviously, it's a surprise to have a major competitor retain Tesla to build. It was explained to me by an expert that the problem that they ran into is that Tesla is sort of the best in delivering these power packs, and it's better for folks like VW and others to select Tesla because paying off-peak power rates during peak times in order to charge vehicles is just a smart move. So from a cost standpoint, the decision made by VW seems like a good one, but it's kind of a shock to have all the data they generate on their vehicles being charged immediately going to Tesla, a major competitor in the space. So we'll finish up our conversation regarding what's going on with Daimler to just sort of discuss the difference between the structure of Tesla and Daimler and why we might be seeing some of these differences in performance. In the case of Silicon Valley, what they found at some of the big companies like IBM, et cetera, was it was better to send certain projects out to Skunk Works and then bring them back in once a solution had been arrived at and use the resources of the big company to deliver. One key point that comes to mind here is that Daimler maintains its own design staff for all vehicles, and Tesla, as of a year and a half ago, only had 14 people in their design department. So all the vehicles designed by Tesla, they're picking 2 or 3 of the best designers in the world. They will then send those designers what they're trying to accomplish, and then they kind of have a bake-off between design firms to see which design will be used by Tesla. So what this does is it allows you to have a blank sheet of paper as you're doing design, and you can take risks and ideas in that other people might not be doing. So I kind of bring this up in this case because I believe one of the challenges for Daimler is they have a large organization and they have to move all these different departments towards a certain mission or goal, and corralling all those folks to get things done, I think is part of the challenge that they're having. I will say I'm in a bit of shock right now relative to Daimler because the Tesla body style has been out for almost 2 years now, and it's well known to everyone what the truck looks like and why. And I'm very surprised to see that Daimler has not made an effort to introduce something other than a retrofitted semi in the iteration that it currently is, namely with electric motors being used, you no longer need the giant engine bay in front. So you can now reconfigure the cabin to optimize ergonomics for the drivers. And so the future we're headed into is that ergonomic change for drivers is important because the number of drivers is declining, and people getting hurt and having a more efficient workspace is a part of both retaining short and long-term drivers. The also move to electric also reduces the headaches of what the truck driver has to manage, so people don't have to be as experienced or trained in order to deal with the driving an electric product. So it'll be interesting to see how and if and what the process is for Daimler to respond, but to date they're looking really shaky, and they already have the problems we've discussed of shortage of batteries to go into all the vehicles that they're doing, as well as a battery standard that allows it to perform comparable to supercharging and other things that Tesla's doing, and then add in the whole range challenges they're having. So there's just a plethora of things that have to be managed that Tesla is doing a good job of. One final note that I'm still chuckling over and fascinated by is the head of Freightliner, which is Daimler's U.S. division, announced that they actually have a coalition of current customers to help in the transition to electricity. Daimler is helping those customers to build out the charging facilities that they may need relative to electric trucks, and they've created this coalition to have feedback from customers as well as to help them in their process of moving products into the space. I wanted to note that Daimler has a coalition and Tesla does not. At this point, anybody that's looking at purchasing can self-coalesce if they choose to, but there is no coalition because you're buying off the shelf, and Tesla is basically saying we don't need a coalition because we actually have a product that works, and you can collect data on it, and we don't have any competitors that do of any magnitude. So the coalition process that Daimler has described has sort of not been adopted by Tesla. The next thing we wanted to move into is sort of the investment thesis for Tesla. We have been predicting that Tesla's stock price should double in 2019, driven by increasing sales of the Model 3 globally. And then once you add in things like the Semi and other products, you just see those sales continuing to spike. One of the constraints to this whole thing to be noted is the fact that the new lines at the Gigafactory won't be done until the end of March. So there is still that 500 to 6,500 unit production availability for vehicles, and then we see how sales go from there. The second note thing from an investment standpoint is the fact that there's a number, $57,000. So the average price, selling price of the Model 3 in the United States over 100,000 vehicles was actually $57,000. So what this tells us then is that the 50-ish thousand vehicle represents greater than half of the vehicles that have been purchased in the U.S. and probably heading more like in that 60%, 65% zone, with the rest of the buyers being up in the $70,000 to $80,000 zone relative to, as you know, dual motor and performance. And so this is very interesting because as Tesla has entered Europe, it's elected to enter only at the high-end vehicles to increase their cash reserves, and then move down the price curve towards the $50,000 vehicles as they satiate demand, and they're not trying to have the $50,000 Model 3s cannibalize sales that might be available in Europe. And I would assume the same thing is going on in China. So the question was sort of what's going on with Tesla? How does it affect their stock price? How does it affect the options trading discussions we've been having? So what's fascinating to me is that the answer to this is that I call it the Larry Ellison effect. So the huge question is, how can a company be having greater revenue but profits are declining? And the answer is that there are other costs that are pulling down those profits while you're trying to grow the business. And so the first of those that really popped to mind that I wanted to mention was that there's been a question over Tesla for the last several years, and what that question has been is, why did Elon Musk choose to buy SolarCity? And so the reason why that question is out there is Elon was the CEO of SolarCity, number one. Number two, his cousin was another sort of co-CEO or primarily running it while he was running Tesla and other things. Number three, Elon was a large shareholder in SolarCity. So by a bunch of reasons, SolarCity was fully controlled by Tesla/Elon Musk, and therefore no need to merge the two companies. So the question was, why did they do it and take on $5 billion worth of purchase price and debt that was assumed? And the answer to it is what I call the Larry Ellison effect. Larry Ellison of Oracle owns 20%, like Elon does, of his company. And Larry came up with a technique where he would start developing businesses with his own money. And if those businesses weren't doing well, he would simply turn around and have Oracle buy the business. And that prevented him from losing huge amounts of money on that investment. If we look at Tesla, similar situation. We have Elon Musk in full control of SolarCity, but electing to purchase it. And now what you have going on is with the sales of SolarCity diving precipitously, you have this issue where that company can't really service the cost that Tesla incurred buying it, and there's not any products, growing or, in the horizon to say it was a great idea. There were a lot of lawsuits that flew around because of the purchase that were settled, but it was a done deal. But all the debt related to that issue is laying on the balance sheet, and we're relying on Tesla to sort of grow its way in profitability to sort of sop up the ragged ink of some of these other purchases. The next thing that comes to mind is that there's something called Maxwell Technology, which is the latest acquisition that's been announced by Tesla. The company is being purchased for $218 million. And when you talk about ultrachargers or the products that they make, there's a suggestion that there are synergies in a similar manner to how SolarCity was supposed to have synergies in terms of how they would come together with Tesla. The challenge right now is that I'm surprised by, and we'll try to put a chart up on it, is over the last 3 years, the stock price of Maxwell Technologies has declined from about $40 a share to under $5, and basically it's a penny stock. So Tesla paid a 50% premium to buy this company. You usually pay a premium to buy a company when there's potentially other suitors that might purchase it away from you. But when your stock price is falling that fast, it suggests that there's a lot of issues with that company that the marketplace sees and the customers see, and therefore the stock price falls as a result of them just not selling as much stuff. And so, it's being purchased. I believe there are some things Tesla can derive from it. There's some mention of some technologies that they have. What I don't understand is why pay $200 million for it when you have a company that's headed towards bankruptcy. You could just buy it out of bankruptcy and get all those, for $20 million, $30 million easily. There weren't any other bidders, as you noticed, so I think it's also a sign in the marketplace that, this company is perhaps a waste of money. It's kind of not a big deal because Tesla is a $50 billion company, so $200 million in stock is not that big a deal, but it does add to the management headache of Tesla. And those are low numbers, but it's still dollars in an environment where you're firing employees to get your cost basis down, et cetera. You're diluting the stock. It's an interesting move. And one of the Silicon Valley suggestions I want to make from the Larry Ellison effect is one of the things that also does happen is that there's a lot of deep and broad friendships across the valley that extend to other places. And we believe that what's going on here is that there are some fairly powerful folks who are heavily invested in that company that Elon may owe a favor to. And $200 million for something that he can claim synergy on isn't that big a deal. And Tesla may or may not in the future be able to benefit from the affiliation in the manner that was described, but it's sort of Elon's choice to make it, and it's our belief that it's another move, to appease someone he's close to. But the low price of the stock suggests that you can get similar or better technologies out in the marketplace without having to screw around purchasing this company. You could even sign a long-term deal, take a stake in the company, and then see how they deliver. If they don't, just get rid of the company versus having spent all that money. So I kind of drug you guys through a whole bunch of discussions about this because we're starting to dig into the how and why Tesla's stock price will improve and meet shareholder goals of earnings, but also how and why that thesis could actually be affected by costs being taken on that don't have any, accretive value, any high value, real increase to the company, but it's more kind of fun projects that are kind of expensive and that suck up cash. The final part of this discussion, and I listed sort of options as what I wanted to cover as well, is the fact that the whole options discussion of Tesla seems to have changed. one of the reasons we felt Tesla was a great options trading stock is that they're actually hedge funds that have a drone flying over Tesla's factory every day and counting the number of vehicles that are being produced, and therefore being able to anticipate sales. So as you recall, on January 1, Tesla immediately announced the number of cars that had been sold, so the stock price promptly fell 40 points. Now, and it started to recover. So I wanted to bring this up because usually what happens is companies don't announce amount of sales, etc., until earnings are announced. But Tesla sort of changed the game for how one trades both the stock and the options by now starting to reveal early what production numbers are before we can get to what the earnings announcement is. So I just wanted to highlight this to all of you because if you're interested in making money and trading Tesla stock / options, it might behoove you to review the last couple of earnings announcements / announcements on sales, because those that can anticipate what's going on for those sales will be able to anticipate what the movement of the stock price might be and be able to make money both on the stock and the options. So we'll be adding more to this as we go forward. At this point in our show, as I promised, we're just going to roll some footage here of what we found at the local service facility. We had a huge snowstorm. It's rare to see cars covered in snow by Tesla because they maintain in pristine conditions for us to see them at the service facility. So I think this is kind of an interesting space to have this video roll at this point. And I hope you guys enjoy seeing some images. Wanted to remind you as we close out our show today, 20 leg lifts a day on each leg strengthens your quad muscles to make sure your knees are locked in. Don't go to bed within 2, preferably 4 hours of eating to prevent acid indigestion, as well as possibly upper respiratory cancer. And, wanted to thank you again for joining us. Please remember to like and subscribe. Want to thank our Patreon supporters as well. This is Greg for Tesla Fan Insight. Tschüss, macht's gut. Au revoir, lehitraot, choda hafez. And in Jamaica, we say, enough respect, walk good. We look forward to your respectful comments and happy to engage in dialogue. We try to answer all of our comments that are not ugly negative on Tesla. We're supportive of the company and want to see their mission achieved. Have a great day. Bye for now, and thanks for joining us. Today's talk focuses on 2 primary areas. The first one is Daimler has delivered the first in a series, or Daimler Freightliner has delivered a first in a series of semi-trucks in the Los Angeles market. And the first truck that was introduced is $400,000. And if we look at what it would cost for the semi version of that, it exceeds $500,000 for a vehicle that Tesla is charging $250,000 for. So that's the first focus of our show today. The second thing that we're focused on today is where are we in the options as well as investment profile of Tesla. As we know, earnings just came out and Tesla has begun sales to Europe. So the question is, how should we modify our thesis relative to where Tesla currently is going forward? And then beyond that, we have our usual review of what's going on at our service facility and also our health tips. This is Greg for Tesla Fan Insight. Thanks once again for joining us. If this is your first time on our channel, please take time to like and subscribe. If you're a repeat visitor, welcome back. So, sort of some bombshell news hit, and that was the fact that the Freightliner division of Daimler-Benz has begun deliveries to the Port of Los Angeles with the help of Penske of their version of the electric semi-truck. So it was kind of shocking. There are a bunch of elements to what we learned. As of December 23rd, there were 2 trucks delivered. And in fact, there was supposed to be a fleet of 25 trucks, both Class 7, which is a 55,000 max carrying truck and freight, and Class 8, which is an 80,000 max carrying of freight and truck. And the bottom line is that it was announced that the only 2 trucks will be delivered